I wore the pearls that night, the ones Richard gave me for our first anniversary, back when I still believed expensive gifts meant love. 27 years later, I know better. Expensive gifts mean silence. They mean gratitude. They mean don't ask questions. The restaurant was the inn at Little Washington, 2 hours from our home in Alexandria. Richard had insisted on the drive. The Germans appreciate discretion, he said, adjusting his cufflinks in the bathroom mirror that morning. And you appreciate good food. Everyone wins. I didn't ask why I needed to come. After 28 years of marriage, I had learned that certain questions only led to arguments, and arguments only led to Richard's cold silence for days. So I put on my black dress, clasped the pearls around my neck, and became what he needed me to be. Elegant, quiet, and decorative. The dining room smelled of butter and old money. Crystal chandeliers cast warm shadows on walls covered in pastoral paintings. Our table was in a private corner, away from other guests. Richard had requested it specifically. There were 4 Germans, 2 men in their 60s, with silver hair and expensive watches. A younger man, maybe 40, with the eager look of someone trying to impress his superiors. And a woman, about my age, blonde, wearing a silk blouse the color of champagne. She smiled at me when we sat down, the kind of smile women give each other when they're both playing the same role at the same dinner. Olivia, this is Herr Dietrich, Herr Brandt, Herr Müller, and Frau Kaufmann, Richard said, gesturing to each of them. They're consulting on the Meridian Project? I nodded and smiled. I had no idea what the Meridian Project was. Richard never discussed his work with me beyond vague references to consulting and government relations. Lobbyist, his business card said. Fixer, I had learned to understand. The first hour passed in a blur of courses and small talk. The Germans spoke excellent English, though they occasionally slipped into their native language when discussing something among themselves. Richard laughed at their jokes, refilled their wine glasses, touched Herr Dietrich's arm with practiced familiarity. I ate my duck confit and watched. It was somewhere between the cheese course and dessert that I heard it. Herr Brandt leaned toward Herr Dietrich and murmured something in German. I caught the words "seine Frau," his wife, and instinctively turned my attention to the breadbasket, pretending to consider another role. Sie ist nur Dekoration, Herr Dietrich replied, glancing at me with a polite smile. She's just decoration. Richard sagt, sie versteht nichts von Geschäften. Adieu, Richard says she doesn't understand anything about business. I kept my face neutral. I reached for the bread. I had spent 4 years at Georgetown studying German literature, 3 more years working as a translator for the State Department before I met Richard, before I gave it all up to support his career, to raise our children, to become the woman he needed me to be. They didn't know. Richard had never told them. Perhaps Richard himself had forgotten. Sie ist emotional schwach, Richard said, joining their conversation seamlessly. His German was rougher than mine, accented but functional, leicht zu manipulieren, aber sie sieht gut aus bei Veranstaltungen. She's emotionally weak, easy to manipulate, but she looks good at events. The bread roll in my hand felt like stone. I set it down carefully on my plate. Herr Müller, the younger one, laughed. Praktisch, he said. Practical. Sehr praktisch, Richard agreed. Sie unterschreibt alles, was ich ihr vorlege. Keine Fragen. Very practical. She signs everything I put in front of her. No questions. I thought about the documents I had signed over the years. Tax returns I never read. Property transfers I never questioned. Power of attorney forms that Richard assured me were just in case something happens to me. Standard procedure, he always said. Trust me, he always said. I had trusted him. The blonde woman, Frau Kaufmann, shifted in her seat. She looked at me for a moment, something flickering in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or pity. Then she turned back to her wine. Die Lieferungen gehen durch die Stiftung, Herr Dietrich said, lowering his voice slightly. The shipments go through the foundation. Richards Frau ist Vorstandsmitglied. Ihre Unterschrift legitimiert alles. Richard's wife is on the board. Her signature legitimizes everything. I was on the board of the Hartman Family Foundation. Richard had insisted on it 5 years ago. For tax purposes, he had explained. You just need to sign a few papers once a year. Nothing complicated. I had signed. I always signed. Was es mit den Behörden? Herr Brandt asked. What about the authorities? Richard waved his hand dismissively. Kein Problem. Ich habe Kontakte im Justizministerium und wenn es Fragen gibt, zeige ich auf Olivia. He smiled, a smile I had seen 1,000 times but never really understood until now. Sie ist das perfekte Schutzschild. Reich, dumm und loyal. No problem. I have contacts in the Justice Department, and if there are questions, I point to Olivia. She's the perfect shield. Rich, dumb, and loyal. The waiter arrived with dessert. Chocolate soufflé, Richard's favorite. He thanked the waiter in English, complimented the presentation, turned to me with that same smile. Enjoying yourself, darling? Very much, I said. My voice didn't shake. The duck was excellent. I knew you'd like it. He patted my hand. His palm was warm and dry against my skin. That's why I brought you. You deserve a nice evening out. I smiled back at him. 28 years of practice made it easy. The rest of dinner passed in fragments. I heard them discuss shipment routes, offshore accounts, a contact in Munich who could handle the documentation. I heard my husband describe me as useful 3 more times. I heard Frau Kaufmann excuse herself to the restroom and not return for 15 minutes. When the check came, Richard paid in cash, large bills, crisp and new. In the car on the way home, he turned on classical music and drove in satisfied silence. I watched the dark Virginia countryside roll past my window and thought about the woman I had been before I met him. 25 years old, confident, fluent in 3 languages, a career I loved, colleagues who respected me, a small apartment in DuPont Circle that was entirely my own. Then Richard, handsome, charming, ambitious Richard, who told me I was too smart to waste my talents on government work, who said he needed a partner, not an employee, who promised me a life of comfort and purpose and love. I gave up my job 6 months after the wedding. Daniel was born a year later, then Emma, then Caroline. The years blurred together in a haze of school plays and soccer games and dinner parties, where I smiled and nodded and never spoke about anything that mattered. Somewhere along the way, I had become exactly what Richard described: decoration, a signature on documents I didn't read, a shield for crimes I didn't know about, until tonight. Richard pulled into our driveway at 11:40. The house was dark, except for the porch light. Our children were grown and gone. Daniel to his own apartment in Arlington, Emma to her teaching job in Baltimore, Caroline to medical school in Philadelphia. The house that once felt full now echoed with absence. "I'm going to check my emails," Richard said, heading toward his office. "Don't wait up." I went upstairs to our bedroom. His jacket hung on the chair by the window, where he always tossed it before changing. I stared at it for a long moment, then I walked over and slipped my hand into the inside pocket. A receipt from a restaurant I didn't recognize. A business card for someone named Heinrich Weber, no title, just a phone number, and a small envelope, cream-colored, with a hotel logo embossed in gold. The Hay Adams, Washington, D.C. Inside was a key card and a handwritten note. Zimmer 712, Donnerstag 19 Uhr, M, room 712, Thursday 7 p.m. M. Thursday was 2 days away. I put everything back exactly as I had found it. I changed into my nightgown, removed the pearls, and placed them in their velvet box. I washed my face, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed. When Richard came upstairs an hour later, I pretended to be asleep. He didn't try to wake me. He hadn't tried in years. I lay in the darkness and listened to his breathing slow into sleep. 28 years, 3 children, countless dinner parties, holidays, anniversaries. I had given him everything, my career, my identity, my trust. And he had used me. Every signature, every smile, every silent moment of compliance. I was his shield, his cover, his useful idiot. The ceiling fan turned slowly above me, casting faint shadows in the moonlight. I thought about the documents in his office safe, the foundation paperwork I had never really examined, the tax returns with numbers I had never verified. I thought about Daniel, who worked at his father's firm, who defended Richard at every family dinner, who called me dramatic when I complained about feeling invisible. Did he know? Was my own son part of this? I thought about Vivian, my sister, who had grown so close to Richard over the past few years, who always took his side in arguments, who wore the emerald earrings he had given her as a thank you for being such a supportive sister-in-law. How deep did this go? The clock on the nightstand read 2:47 a.m. Richard snored softly beside me, untroubled, unaware. I had spent 28 years being the woman he wanted me to be, quiet, compliant, invisible, but he had made one mistake. He had forgotten who I was before I became his wife. He had forgotten that I spoke German, that I understood every word. And now I had 2 days to decide what to do with that knowledge. Thursday, room 712 M. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. This story was sent to us by a listener who wishes to remain anonymous. If you have a story you'd like to share, send it to our channel, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if you discovered your husband had been using you as a shield for his crimes for almost 30 years? Thursday came faster than I expected, or maybe I had been counting the hours so carefully that time seemed to accelerate, rushing toward the moment I would have to decide what kind of woman I really was. I didn't go to the Hay Adams. I thought about it. Imagined myself walking into the lobby, taking the elevator to the 7th floor, pressing my ear against the door of room 712. But what would that prove? I already knew my husband was meeting someone. Seeing it with my own eyes would give me pain, not power. Instead, I spent Thursday afternoon in Richard's office. He had left for New York that morning. A meeting with investors, he said. He would be back Saturday. He kissed my cheek at the door, told me not to wait up, and drove away in his silver Mercedes without looking back. I waited 30 minutes, then I walked into his office and closed the door behind me. The room smelled like him, leather, sandalwood, and the faint ghost of cigars he claimed he had stopped smoking years ago. His desk was mahogany, imported from England, covered with papers and a computer I didn't know the password to, but I knew where he kept the things he didn't want me to see. The safe was behind a painting of a sailboat, a gift from Herr Dietrich, I now realized. The combination was our wedding anniversary, August 14th, 1996. Richard was sentimental about strange things. Inside, I found exactly what I expected. Cash, about $40,000 in hundreds. Passports, his, mine, and 3 I didn't recognize with German names. a folder of property deeds for addresses I'd never heard of, and a thick manila envelope labeled Foundation, Confidential. I sat on the floor of my husband's office and read for 3 hours. The Hartman Family Foundation, according to official documents, supported educational initiatives in underserved communities. According to these papers, it was a laundry machine. Money came in from German donors, the same names from dinner. Money went out to shell companies in Delaware, Nevada, the Cayman Islands. My signature appeared on 17 documents authorizing transfers I had never understood. There were emails too, printed copies, conversations with Herr Dietrich about the shipment schedule, references to the American contact who could smooth things with customs, and one email dated 3 months ago that made my hands shake. It was from my sister. Richard, Vivian had written, the account in my name is ready. Transfer the $200,000 whenever you're ready. Olivia won't suspect anything. She still thinks I borrowed money from you for the divorce settlement. You were right. She really doesn't pay attention to anything. See you at Thanksgiving. V. I read it 4 times, then I put everything back exactly as I had found it, closed the safe, straightened the painting, and walked out. My sister. My own sister. Vivian and I had never been close. She was 3 years younger, always jealous of things I didn't even want. Our mother's attention, our father's approval, the scholarship I got to Georgetown while she went to community college. When her husband Tom left her 8 years ago, I held her while she cried and helped her pay for the lawyer. Richard had given her $50,000 for that lawyer. A loan, he called it. Family helping family. Now I understood. It wasn't a loan, it was a down payment. Thanksgiving was 6 weeks away. Richard came home Saturday evening, smelling of airport and exhaustion. He kissed my cheek, asked what was for dinner, and disappeared into his office for 2 hours. When he emerged, he was smiling. Good news, he said. The New York meeting went well. We're expanding the foundation's reach. More donors, more impact. That's wonderful, I said. Vivian's coming for dinner Wednesday. She wants to discuss her involvement. I think it's time we brought her onto the board officially. I set down my fork. Vivian, on the board? She's family, and she's been so helpful with the administrative side, it makes sense. I looked at my husband, his confident smile, his expensive haircut, his hands that had signed checks to my sister for years while I thought he was being generous. Of course, I said, that makes sense. Vivian came Wednesday with lilies, my least favorite, though she always claimed to forget, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my grocery budget. Olivia, you look wonderful. She hugged me in the doorway, perfume overwhelming. Is that a new dress? It's so comfortable looking. Richard appeared behind me, beaming. Vivian, come in. We have so much to discuss. I watched them walk into the living room together, already deep in conversation about the new initiative and the German partners. Vivian laughed at something Richard said, touching his arm with practiced familiarity. In the kitchen, I poured myself wine and thought about the email. $200,000. My sister had taken $200,000 from my husband to lie to me. Dinner was roast chicken, Richard's favorite. I served silently while they talked about expansion plans and donor cultivation. At some point, Vivian mentioned a trip to Munich. For the foundation? I asked. They both looked at me as if surprised I could speak. Just a vacation, Vivian said smoothly. I've always wanted to see the Christmas markets. Munich has beautiful Christmas markets, Richard agreed. Maybe we should all go sometime. After dinner, Richard excused himself for a phone call. Vivian and I were alone in the dining room. Olivia, she said, leaning forward, I want to thank you for being so understanding. About Richard helping me with a divorce. I know it must have seemed like a lot of money. I studied my sister's face. The careful makeup, the subtle Botox, the earrings that sparkled green in candlelight. Richard's emeralds. It was family helping family, I said. That's what Richard always says. Exactly. Vivian smiled. Family helping family. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were cold. I'm so glad we understand each other. I understood her perfectly. I just wasn't sure she understood me. Daniel came Sunday, unannounced. My son liked schedules, liked control. Richard's son, through and through. Mum, we need to talk about Dad. I was in the garden, pulling weeds from the flower bed I had planted 15 years ago. The roses were dying. They had been dying for years, but I kept trying to save them. Aunt Vivian called me, he said, sitting on the stone bench. She's worried about you. She says you've been acting strange, asking questions about the foundation, about Dad's business. I looked at my son, 26 years old, handsome, successful, everything Richard wanted. I remembered him at 6, showing me a crayon drawing of our family. 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. This is us, he had said, forever and ever. I'm your mother, Daniel. I'm allowed to be curious about our finances. There are things you don't understand. Complicated things. Dad's work is sensitive. If you start asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. To whom? Who would I ask? That's the point. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so like Richard's it made my chest ache. Look, Mom, Dad's provided for all of us. Beautiful house, good schools, everything. The least you can do is trust him. The least I can do? I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it, Daniel? He was quiet. A bird sang in the oak tree at the edge of the yard. The same tree where I had pushed Daniel on a tire swing, where Emma had her first kiss, where Caroline built her treehouse. I just think you should be careful, Daniel said finally, about what you say, what you do. He met my eyes, and something flickered there. Fear. Guilt. That vanished quickly. For everyone's sake. Is that a warning? It's advice, from your son who loves you. He left after coffee. I watched his card disappear and thought about his words. For everyone's sake. Not for your sake. For everyone's sake. As if I were a threat. As if my curiosity could damage something larger than myself. Did Daniel know? Had Richard brought him into the business, made him complicit? Or was he just a loyal son defending a father he couldn't bear to doubt? That night, Richard came home late, smelling like wine and someone else's perfume. Subtle, floral, nothing like Vivian's. Daniel mentioned you've been stressed, he said. Maybe we should take a vacation after the gala, just the two of us. I looked at my husband, the man I had trusted for 28 years. That sounds lovely. Good. Don't worry about anything, Olivia. I'll take care of everything. I always do. He kissed my forehead and went to bed. I sat in the dark living room. Vivian was watching me. Daniel was warning me. Richard was planning something that felt like containment. Thanksgiving was 5 weeks away. 5 weeks until my sister would sit at my table, lying to my face while wearing earrings bought with money from crimes I had unknowingly endorsed. I thought about my option. Confront Richard? No proof I could use without revealing I searched his office. Leave? Everything was tied to him. House, cars, accounts. Or wait, watch, gather information. Become the woman Richard thought I was. Quiet, compliant, invisible, while learning everything I needed to destroy him. 5 weeks until Thanksgiving. 5 weeks to find how deep the betrayal went. 5 weeks to discover if anyone in this family remained trustworthy. Daniel's words echoed as I climbed the stairs. For everyone's sake. He had no idea what I was willing to do. For my sake. For the woman I used to be. The woman who understood every word. The story was sent by a listener from Virginia. Sometimes the people closest to us hide the deepest secrets. If you have a story about family betrayal, send it to our channel. And tell us, could you sit at Thanksgiving dinner with the sister who helped hide your husband's crimes? The first sign that something had changed came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was at the grocery store, filling my cart with the ingredients for Richard's favorite pot roast, when my credit card was declined. The teenage cashier looked at me with a mixture of pity and impatience as I fumbled through my wallet for another card. That one was declined too, and the next. Ma'am, do you have cash? I had $47 in my purse. The groceries totaled $183. I left the cart at the register and walked to my car with burning cheeks. In 28 years of marriage, I had never been refused at a checkout counter. I had never even thought about money. It was simply there, appearing in accounts I didn't manage, paying for things I didn't question. When I got home, I called the bank. A polite young man informed me that my cards had been reported lost and replacements would be mailed to my husband's office address. But I didn't report them lost, I said. The account holder did, ma'am, Mr. Hartman. I hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the marble countertop where I had prepared thousands of meals for a family that was slowly revealing itself to be a conspiracy. That evening, Richard came home with flowers. Roses, red ones, the expensive kind from the florist downtown. I heard about the card situation, he said, kissing my cheek. I'm so sorry, darling. There was a security breach at the bank. They recommended we cancel everything and start fresh. New cards will arrive next week. Next week? I know it's inconvenient. He handed me $500 bills, crisp and new. This should cover anything you need in the meantime. Just let me know when you're running low. I looked at the money in my hand. An allowance. After 28 years, I was being given an allowance like a child. Thank you, I said. Of course. He smiled, that same warm smile I had fallen in love with decades ago. I take care of you, Olivia. I always have. The second sign came 4 days later. I had been sleeping in the guest room since the dinner with the Germans. Richard hadn't asked why, and I hadn't explained. We moved around each other like ghosts, polite and distant, performing a marriage that had died long before I knew it was sick. That Friday, I came home from a walk to find 2 men in the hallway outside Richard's office. They were carrying boxes. What's going on? I asked. Richard appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. I should have mentioned this. I'm having the office renovated. New built-in shelves, better lighting. These gentlemen are just clearing things out temporarily. I watched them carry another box past me. Through the cardboard, I could see the spines of books. My books, the German literature collection I had brought into the marriage, the translation dictionaries from my working years, the poetry anthologies my mother had given me before she died. Where are they taking those? Storage. Don't worry. Everything will come back when the renovation is done. Those are my books, Richard. He put his hand on my shoulder, gentle and firm. I know, darling, but we need the space. Some of those old things have been cluttering up the shelves for years. When the renovation is done, we'll organize everything properly. Maybe even donate what you don't need anymore. The men carried out another box. This one held my diplomas, my certificate, the framed photo of me at my first translation job, young and smiling and full of hope. I need those, I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. You need to relax. Richard's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder. You've been so tense lately. Everyone's noticed. Daniel, Vivian, even the girls have mentioned it. Maybe you should see someone, a professional. I can make an appointment. I looked up at my husband. In his eyes, I saw something I had never noticed before. Or maybe something I had always chosen not to see. Calculation. The same cool assessment I had seen when he looked at the German businessman. The look of a man evaluating a problem and deciding how to solve it. I'm fine, I said. Of course you are. Shh. He released my shoulder and stepped back. Just think about it, for your own sake. The renovation took 2 weeks. When it was done, the office looked beautiful. New shelves, warm lighting, a reading nook by the window. But my books weren't there. My diplomas weren't there. The space that had held 28 years of my life before Richard had been emptied and filled with his things. Leather-bound classics he'd never read. Awards from organizations I'd never heard of. Photos of him with politicians and businessmen. I didn't ask where my belongings had gone. I already knew the answer. On the first Sunday of November, I went up to the attic. I hadn't been there in years. It was Richard's territory. Boxes of old files, holiday decorations, things we'd accumulated and forgotten. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, and the air smelled like dust and neglect. I was looking for something specific, a box I had packed when Daniel started kindergarten, when I'd finally accepted that my translation career was over and my life as Richard's wife had fully begun. I found it in the corner, behind a stack of Christmas wreaths. The cardboard had softened with age, and when I opened it, the smell of old paper rose up like a ghost. My old work files, client letters, project notes, business cards from colleagues I hadn't spoken to in decades. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, the German-English dictionary I had used every day for 3 years. The margins were filled with my handwriting, notes, corrections, observations, evidence of the woman I used to be. I sat on the dusty floor and held the dictionary in my lap for a long time. Beside the box, covered with the sheet, was the rocking chair. I pulled off the fabric and looked at it. Oak, hand-carved, bought at an antique store in Georgetown the week I found out I was pregnant with Daniel. I had nursed all 3 of my children in this chair, sung them lullabies, held them while they cried through fevers and nightmares. When Caroline left for college, Richard had suggested we donate it. We don't need it anymore, he said. I had insisted on keeping it, and it had ended up here in the attic forgotten. I ran my hand over the worn armrest. The wood was smooth from years of use, shaped by my body, my children's bodies. This chair knew things about me that Richard had never bothered to learn. I sat down. The chair creaked, but held. Through the small attic window, I could see the backyard, the dying roses, the oak tree, the garden I had planted and tended and watched fade. I thought about what I had lost. My career, given up because Richard said he needed me at home. My independence, traded for security that turned out to be a cage. My family, who had become strangers and conspirators. My books, my diplomas, my history, packed into boxes and stored in darkness, while Richard filled the house with his own accomplishments. I had given everything. And what had I received? An allowance? A guest room? A husband who described me as useful in a language he thought I couldn't understand. The attic was cold and quiet. Below me, I could hear Richard moving around the house, making phone calls, living his life. He thought he had won. He thought he had reduced me to what he always believed I was. Decoration, signature, shield. But he had forgotten something. He had forgotten that the woman he married was not the woman he created. Somewhere beneath the 28 years of compliance, the translator was still there, still listening, still understanding. I picked up my old dictionary and opened it to a random page. The German word Vergeltung stared up at me. Retribution. I smiled. That night I made dinner as usual. Pot roast, finally, with the groceries Richard's cash had paid for. He complimented the meal, asked about my day, told me about a conference call with investors. The foundation gala is in 2 weeks, he said. I'll need you there, of course. The Germans are coming. Of course. Wear the pearls. They like traditional. I will. He looked at me across the table, studying my face. You seem calmer. Did you think about what I said? About seeing someone? I did think about it. And? I met his eyes and held them. I've decided I don't need a professional. I've decided to handle things myself. Richard nodded, satisfied. That's my girl. I knew you'd come around. He went to his office after dinner. I washed the dishes, dried them, put them away. Then I went upstairs to the guest room and pulled out the notebook I had hidden under the mattress. For 3 weeks I had been writing down everything. Dates, names, amounts, things I had overheard, things I had found. The shape of Richard's operation was becoming clear. The German donors, the foundation as a funnel, the shell companies, the documents with my signature that made me complicit in crimes I hadn't known existed. I added today's entry, November 5th, cards cancelled, allowance begun, books removed from office. Message clear, I am being erased. I closed the notebook and slid it back under the mattress. 2 weeks until the gala, 2 weeks until the Germans returned, 2 weeks to finish what I had started. Richard thought he was containing me. Richard thought he was making me smaller, more manageable, easier to control. Richard was wrong. In the darkness of the guest room, I thought about the rocking chair in the attic. The woman who had nursed 3 children, who had sung lullabies, who had given up everything for a man who saw her as nothing. That woman wasn't gone. She was just waiting, and soon she would make herself heard. This story was sent by a listener who wants you to know sometimes hitting bottom is where you find the strength to climb. If you've ever felt erased by someone who claimed to love you, share your story with our channel and tell us. What would you do if your husband started removing every trace of who you used to be? The cafe was called Old Town Coffee, a small place on King Street that I used to visit during my translation days. The same brick walls, the same smell of roasted beans, the same corner table where I had once reviewed contracts and dreamed of a career that mattered. I hadn't been here in 23 years. Margaret Chen was already waiting when I arrived. She looked older, of course, we both did, but her eyes still had that sharp intelligence I remembered from our days at the State Department. Olivia Hartman. She stood and hugged me. I couldn't believe it when I got your email. I thought you had disappeared off the face of the earth. I did, in a way. We sat down. She ordered black coffee. I ordered chamomile tea, something to calm my hands, which hadn't stopped trembling since I left the house that morning. So, Margaret said, leaning back, you said you needed help. What kind of help does the wife of Richard Hartman need from a retired translator? I had prepared for this question. I had rehearsed the words in my head for days. But sitting here, facing someone from my old life, I found that the truth was easier than any script. I need to remember who I was, I said, and I need equipment. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Equipment? Recording equipment, something small, something that can capture conversations without being noticed. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. I could see her calculating, assessing, the same way she used to evaluate a difficult translation. What kind of conversations? German. Olivia. She set down her coffee cup. What's going on? I told her. Not everything. Not the foundation, not the shell companies, not my signature on the 17 documents that could send me to prison, but enough. Richard's business partners. The things he said about me when he thought I couldn't understand. The feeling of being erased, one piece at a time, until there was nothing left of the woman I used to be. When I finished, Margaret was silent. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. I always wondered, she said, when you left the department, when you married him, I always wondered if you were happy. You were so talented, Olivia, the best German translator we had, and then you just disappeared. I thought I was choosing something better. We all think that. She squeezed my hand. I can get you what you need. A friend of mine works in security consulting, small devices, high quality, untraceable. But Olivia, are you sure about this? What you're describing, if Richard finds out. He won't find out, and if he does, I thought about the guest room, the cancelled cards, the books packed in boxes. I thought about Daniel's warning and Vivian's cold fingers and the way Richard looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. Then at least I'll have tried, I said. At least I'll have been something more than decoration. Margaret nodded slowly. Give me 3 days. The device arrived in a package marked kitchen supplies. It was smaller than I expected, a black rectangle no bigger than a thumb drive, with a tiny microphone that could pick up conversations from across a room. Margaret had included a note. Battery lasts 8 hours, storage for 40 hours of audio. Good luck, old friend. I hid it in the lining of my purse, the same purse I had carried to every dinner party, every foundation event, every gathering where Richard needed his elegant, silent wife. The gala was in 5 days. Emma called on Tuesday. Mom, I'm coming home this weekend. I was in the kitchen, practicing with the recording device, testing how close I needed to be to capture clear audio. At her words, I fumbled and nearly dropped it. This weekend? But you have school. I took Friday off. Caroline's coming too. We want to be there for the gala. The gala? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Neither of my daughters had attended a foundation event in years. They found them boring, they said. Too many old people talking about money. We've been talking, Emma said carefully. Me and Caroline. About you. About how you've seemed lately. My heart began to pound. Emma, we're worried, Mom. We're not worried like Dad is worried. Not like you need a doctor or something. Worried like something's wrong that nobody's telling us about. And we want to help. I sat down at the kitchen table. Through the window, I could see the garden, the dying roses, the oak tree where my children had played. There's nothing you can do, I said. Mom. Emma's voice was firm, so much like my own voice used to be. We're not kids anymore. We know something's happening. Daniel's been acting weird. Aunt Vivian's been calling constantly, and Dad. She paused. Dad's been asking questions about you, about what you do all day, about whether we think you're stable. Stable, another word Richard used. Another way to make me sound like a problem. What did you tell him? I told him you're fine. I told him you're the most stable person I know. Emma's voice softened. But I want to hear it from you, Mom. Are you okay? Are you safe? I thought about lying. I had become so good at it over the past weeks, so skilled at wearing the mask Richard expected. But this was Emma, my daughter, the one who had inherited my stubbornness and my heart. I'm not okay, I said quietly, but I'm handling it, and I need you to trust me. Trust you to do what? To fix things in my own way. Emma was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. We're still coming. Me and Caroline. Whatever you're doing, you're not doing it alone. The night before the gala, Richard came home late. I was in the living room pretending to read a magazine when I heard his car in the driveway. He walked in smelling of wine and that same subtle perfume. Floral, feminine, definitely not Vivian's. "You're still up," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He sat down across from me, loosening his tie. In the lamplight, he looked tired. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. This man I had married, this man I had loved, this man who had turned our life into a lie. "The Germans are excited about tomorrow," he said. "Herr Dietrich is bringing some new investors. Big money. This could be the biggest year for the foundation yet." "That's wonderful. I need you to be perfect tomorrow, Olivia." He leaned forward, his eyes intent on my face. "Smile. Be charming. Don't ask questions. These people are important. Everything depends on making them feel comfortable." "I understand. Do you?" He studied me, that calculating look I had learned to recognize. "You've been different lately. Quieter, more contained." "I thought that's what you wanted." "It is." He nodded slowly. "It is. I just want to make sure we understand each other. Tomorrow is important, for both of us." I met his gaze and held it. "I understand perfectly, Richard." He smiled, satisfied. "Good. Wear the pearls, and get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." He went upstairs. I stayed in the living room, listening to his footsteps, the running water, the creak of the bed. When the house was finally silent, I pulled out my phone and composed a text to a number Margaret had given me. It was the number of a journalist, an investigative reporter who specialized in financial crimes and non-profit fraud. Margaret had worked with him years ago, back when she still did government consulting. "He's careful," she had said, "thorough, and he knows how to protect his sources." I stared at the blank message screen for a long time. If I did this, if I sent the recordings, the documents, everything I had gathered, there would be no going back. Richard would be destroyed. The foundation would collapse. And Daniel who worked at his father's firm, Daniel who had defended Richard at every turn, Daniel who had told me to be quiet for everyone's sake, Daniel would fall too. My son, my firstborn, the baby I had rocked in that chair in the attic, the boy who had drawn stick figures under a yellow sun. Could I do this to him? I thought about what Margaret had said. "You were so talented, Olivia, and then you just disappeared." I thought about the books in storage, the diplomas packed away, the woman I used to be before Richard taught me to be nothing. I thought about Emma and Caroline, coming home to stand beside me, my daughters, who had somehow grown into women who wouldn't accept silence. I typed the message. "I have information about the Hartman Family Foundation. I have recordings. I have documents. I can provide everything you need, but I need protection, and I need time. The gala is tomorrow. After that, I'll be ready." My finger hovered over the send button. Daniel's face flashed through my mind, 6 years old, showing me his drawing. "This is us, Mom, forever and ever." I pressed send. The reply came within minutes. "I'm listening. Take your time. When you're ready, I'll be here." I deleted the messages and went upstairs. In the darkness of the guest room, I lay awake and listened to the silence. Tomorrow, I would walk into that gala wearing pearls and a smile. I would stand beside my husband and play the part he had written for me. I would let the Germans believe I was decoration, harmless, invisible, and I would record everything. Whatever happened after, to Richard, to Vivian, to Daniel, was out of my hands now. I had made my choice. For the first time in 28 years, I had chosen myself. The clock read 3:47 a.m. Outside, the wind moved through the oak tree, rustling leaves that would soon fall. I closed my eyes and waited for morning. This story was sent by a listener who wants you to know. Sometimes, the hardest choice is the one that sets you free. If you've ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting yourself, share your story with our channel. And tell us, could you sacrifice your own son to escape a life of lies? The gala was held at the Willard Hotel, 3 blocks from the White House. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in black ties carrying silver trays. The kind of event where people wrote checks with 6 figures and called it philanthropy. I wore the pearls. I wore the black dress Richard had chosen. I wore the smile I had perfected over 28 years of marriage, and in my purse, nestled against the silk lining, the recording device was running. Richard guided me through the crowd with his hand on the small of my back, introducing me to donors and board members whose names I immediately forgot. "My wife Olivia," he said over and over, "the heart of our family." They smiled at me. I smiled back. No one suspected anything. The Germans arrived at 8. Herr Dietrich, Herr Brandt, Herr Müller, and a woman I didn't recognize, younger than Frau Kaufmann, with sharp cheekbones and cold blue eyes. She looked at me once, briefly, then turned away as if I didn't exist. "That's Marlene," Emma whispered beside me. She had positioned herself at my left, with Caroline at my right, my daughters flanking me like guards. I overheard Dad talking to her earlier. They seemed close. "Marlene, M." I watched her cross the room to Richard's side. He leaned down to hear something she said, and his hand brushed her arm. Casual, familiar, the touch of a man who had touched her many times before. So this was the woman from the hotel. This was the perfume on his collar. This was another piece of the lie I had been living. "Mom," Caroline said quietly, "are you okay?" "I'm fine." I adjusted my pearls and kept smiling. Stay close to me tonight, both of you. The dinner speeches began at 9. Richard took the podium to thank the donors, praise the foundation's work, promise even greater impact in the coming year. He spoke about education, opportunity, the importance of giving back. He sounded sincere, he always did. I sat at the head table with Emma and Caroline, picking at salmon I couldn't taste, nodding at conversation I couldn't hear. The recording device had been running for 2 hours. I had captured Richard's conversations with Herr Dietrich, his whispered exchange with Marlene, a phone call he took in the hallway where he mentioned the Munich transfer and the new accounts. It wasn't enough. I needed more. After dinner, the guests scattered into smaller groups. Richard excused himself to speak with investors in a private room. I told Emma I was going to the restroom and slipped away. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, lined with oil paintings of historical scenes. I could hear Richard's voice coming from behind a closed door at the end of the corridor. I walked toward it slowly, my heels silent on the thick carpet. Understand the timeline, Richard was saying. The transfers need to happen before the end of the quarter. Olivia's signature is already on the authorization forms. And if there are questions? Herr Dietrich's voice calm and measured. There won't be. She doesn't even read what she signs anymore. 28 years, and she still thinks the foundation actually helps people. Richard laughed. The perfect, useful idiot. I pressed my purse against the door, angling the microphone toward the gap at the bottom. What about the boy? Herr Brandt asked. Marlene says he's getting older, asking questions. Lars is 8. He doesn't understand anything yet, and Marlene knows to keep him quiet. She's been well compensated. Lars, a child. Richard's child. My hand trembled against the door. Inside the room, they continued talking. Amounts, accounts, schedules. I recorded it all. Every word, every name, every crime. I was so focused on the conversation that I didn't hear the footsteps behind me. Mom! I spun around. Daniel stood in the hallway, his face pale, his eyes wide. What are you doing? He whispered. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My son was staring at me, at my purse pressed against the door, at the faint red light of the recording device visible through the fabric. Mom, what is that? Are you... He stopped. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something I couldn't name. You're recording them? Daniel, how much do you know? I looked at my son, 26 years old. So much like his father, so certain of his place in the world. But in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of me, of what I might have discovered. Everything, I said. I know everything. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Inside the room, Richard laughed at something Herr Dietrich said. Come with me, Daniel said finally. There's something you need to see. He led me down a back staircase, through a service corridor, out to the parking garage where his car was waiting. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt fragile, breakable, like glass about to shatter. He drove to Richard's office. The building was dark, empty on a Saturday night. Daniel had keys. Of course he did. He was Richard's son, Richard's protégé, Richard's heir apparent. I found this last week, Daniel said as we rode the elevator up. I wasn't looking for it. I was searching for a contract Dad asked me to file, and I opened the wrong drawer in his desk. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone holding himself together by will alone. I should have told you then. I didn't know how. The office was exactly as I remembered it from my one visit years ago. Mahogany furniture, leather chairs, awards on the walls. Daniel walked to Richard's desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a safe. He knew the combination. I memorized it by accident, he said. I saw Dad open it once, when I was working late. I didn't think anything of it at the time. The safe clicked open. Daniel reached inside and pulled out a folder, a stack of photographs, and a black pen drive. The folder is financial records, he said. Shell companies, offshore accounts, transfer schedules. Your signature is on half of them. He set it aside. The photographs. He handed them to me. My hands were shaking as I looked through them. Marlene, younger, smiling at the camera. Marlene pregnant. Marlene holding a newborn baby with Richard's eyes. The baby growing into a toddler, then a child. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, soccer games, a family. A secret family Richard had been building for 8 years while I raised our children and signed his documents and played my part. His name is Lars, Daniel said quietly. He's 8 years old. He lives in Munich with his mother. Dad visits them 4 times a year. He's been paying Marlene $8,000 a month since the boy was born. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. There's more. Daniel picked up the pen drive. This has everything. Dad's real finances, the foundation's actual operations, emails, contracts, recordings of phone calls. He kept it all, Mom. Evidence of everything he's done. Why would he keep evidence? Insurance, in case his partners ever turned on him. Daniel's voice cracked. He told me once that the smartest criminals always have leverage. I thought he was joking. He held out the pen drive. I stared at it, small, black, innocent-looking. The key to destroying everything. There's something else on here, Daniel said. Something you're not going to want to see. What? He couldn't meet my eyes. A document, dated 3 months ago. It's a new will. A will? Dad changed his inheritance plan. Emma, Caroline, and I, we're still in it, but our shares have been reduced significantly. He swallowed hard. The majority of the estate goes to Lars, and to Aunt Vivian for her years of loyal service. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. He was going to leave everything to them, I said. Not everything, but most of it. The house, the investments, the foundation assets. Daniel finally looked at me, and I saw that his eyes were wet. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I defended him. I told you to be quiet. I thought... His voice broke. I thought I knew him. I thought I was protecting our family. I looked at my son. This man I had raised, this man I had loved, this man who had chosen his father over me again and again. And I saw what I hadn't been able to see before. He was as much a victim as I was, manipulated, used, deceived. You didn't know, I said. I should have known. I should have listened to you. You're listening now. I took the pen drive from his hand. It was warm from his grip, small enough to disappear in my palm. What are you going to do? He asked. What I should have done years ago. I put the pen drive in my purse, next to the recording device that was still running, still capturing every word. I'm going to tell the truth. Daniel nodded slowly. What do you need from me? I looked at my son. For the first time in years, I saw the boy who had drawn stick figures under a yellow sun, the boy who had believed in forever. I need you to choose, I said. Your father or your family. You can't have both anymore. The silence stretched between us. Outside, the city hummed with Saturday night traffic, oblivious to the world collapsing in this dark office. I choose you, Daniel said finally. I choose us. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold, trembling, but they held on tight. Then let's go home, I said. We have work to do. We have work. This story was sent by a listener who wants you to know. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who finally help us heal. If you've ever had to forgive someone who betrayed you, share your story with our channel. And tell us, could you accept your son back after he chose your enemy over you? The FBI came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the gala. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I heard the cars pull into the driveway. 4 black SUVs, no sirens, no drama, just quiet efficiency, the way Richard always preferred his business conducted. He was in his office when they knocked. I opened the door and stepped aside without a word. The agents moved past me with polite nods, their badges already visible, their faces professionally blank. Richard Hartman, the lead agent said. I heard Richard's voice from the office, calm at first, then rising. Questions, denials, the rustle of papers, the click of handcuffs. When they brought him through the hallway, his face was pale, his eyes wild with disbelief. Olivia. He stopped in front of me, the agents holding his arms. Olivia, this is a mistake. Call Daniel. Call the lawyer. Tell them what, Richard? He stared at me. I watched the realization dawn in his eyes. Slow at first, then all at once, like a sunrise he couldn't stop. You, he whispered. It was you. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. 28 years of marriage, and he had never really seen me. Now finally he did. The agents led him to the car. I stood in the doorway and watched until the SUVs disappeared around the corner. Then I went back inside, poured my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in the silence of my empty house. It was over. The investigation had moved quickly once Daniel delivered the pen drive to the journalist, who delivered it to the FBI. The recordings from the gala, combined with the financial documents from Richard's safe, painted a picture so clear that even Richard's expensive lawyers couldn't blur it. Money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. 20 years of crimes, documented in his own meticulous handwriting, signed with his own elegant signature. And mine. My signature was there too, on 17 documents I had never read, but Daniel had made sure the FBI understood. I was a victim, not a conspirator, an unwitting shield, not a willing participant. The prosecutors agreed to grant me immunity in exchange for my testimony. Richard would face trial. Richard would likely spend the rest of his life in prison, and I would finally be free. Vivian called that afternoon. Olivia, you have to help me. Her voice was high, panicked, nothing like the smooth confidence I had heard at dinner parties for years. They've frozen my accounts, all of them. The money Richard transferred, they say it's evidence. They say I could be charged as an accessory. I held the phone away from my ear and looked out the window at the garden. The roses were still dying, but I had stopped trying to save them. Some things weren't worth saving. Olivia, are you there? I'm here, Vivian. You have to tell them I didn't know. Tell them I was just following Richard's instructions. Tell them what? I cut her off. That you took $200,000 to help your brother-in-law hide money from your own sister? That you wore his emeralds and ate at his table and watched him erase me piece by piece, and you said nothing? Silence on the line. I read your email, Vivian. The one where you told Richard I don't pay attention to anything. The one where you thanked him for being right about me. Olivia, I can explain. No, you can't. My voice was steady, calm, colder than I had ever heard it. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I went upstairs and found the velvet box where I kept the emerald earrings she had admired so many times. I put them in an envelope, addressed it to the FBI field office, and set it by the door to mail later. Family helping family. That's what Richard always said. Emma and Caroline arrived that evening. They had driven down together from Baltimore and Philadelphia, their cars packed with groceries and wine, and the determined energy of daughters who refused to let their mother face this alone. We're staying for a while, Emma announced, carrying bags into the kitchen. Don't argue. I wasn't going to. Caroline hugged me tight. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. I looked at my daughters. Strong, fierce, nothing like the decoration Richard had tried to make me. I have something to show you. I led them up to the attic. The rocking chair was where I had left it, dusty and waiting. Together, the three of us carried it down the stairs, through the hallway, into the living room. We set it by the window, in the spot where Richard's leather armchair used to be. "Mom," Emma said softly, "is this the chair you used to rock us in?" "It is." "I remember this." Caroline ran her hand over the worn wood. "You used to sing to me when I was little and couldn't sleep." "I remember too." We stood there in silence, 3 women in a house that was finally ours. Daniel came by the next morning with coffee and documents. He had resigned from Richard's firm, his own choice, before they could fire him. The investigation would clear him of wrongdoing, but his career in that world was over. He didn't seem to mind. "I found something else in Dad's files," he said, spreading papers on the kitchen table. "The property deeds. The ones for addresses we didn't recognize. What about them? They're in your name, Mom, all of them. Dad put them in your name years ago, probably for tax purposes. A condo in Miami, a cottage in Vermont, a rental property in Georgetown." He looked up at me. He was so focused on hiding his crimes that he forgot he'd hidden assets in your name too. "The FBI can't touch them. They're yours." I stared at the documents. 3 properties I'd never known about, worth a combined $3 million. Enough to start over, enough to live on my own terms. "Ironic," I said. "He spent 28 years making sure I had nothing, and in the end, he gave me everything I need." Daniel smiled. A real smile, the first I had seen from him in months. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I have time to figure it out." The afternoon before Richard's arraignment, I drove to the county jail for the last visit I would ever make. He was thinner than I remembered, grayer, diminished in his orange jumpsuit. The man who had commanded rooms and signed million-dollar deals now sat behind plexiglass, waiting for permission to speak. "Why?" he asked. "After everything I gave you, the house, the life, the children, why would you destroy it all?" I looked at my husband, this stranger I had slept beside for 28 years, and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no grief, just emptiness, and beneath it something that might have been peace. "You didn't give me anything, Richard. You took my career, my identity, my family. You took everything and made me thank you for it." I leaned forward. "But you made one mistake. You forgot I spoke German. You forgot I understood every word." His face went pale. "Ich habe alles verstanden," I said. I understood everything. From the very first dinner. I stood up and walked to the door. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. I had one more thing to do. The pearls were in their velvet box on my dresser, where I had placed them the night of the gala. I picked them up and held them to the light. $15,000 worth of silence, 27 years of elegant compliance. I wrote a note on a small piece of paper. "Ich habe alles verstanden." Then I drove to the county jail, handed the box to the front desk, and asked them to deliver it to Richard Hartman. "From his wife," I said, "his ex-wife." Marlene arrived on a Sunday. I was in the garden, not tending the roses. I had finally pulled them out, roots and all, but planting new flowers. Lavender, sage, wild flowers that could survive without constant care. Emma was helping me, her hands dirty, her face peaceful. The taxi pulled up to the curb. A woman got out, blonde, tired, older than the photographs in Richard's safe. And beside her, holding her hand, a small boy with dark hair and eyes I recognized. Richard's eyes, my husband's eyes, in a child's face. "Mrs. Hartman?" Marlene's voice was accented, hesitant. "I'm sorry to come without calling. I did not know where else to go." I stood up slowly, pulling off my gardening gloves. Emma moved closer to me, protective. "They have frozen everything," Marlene continued. "The accounts Richard set up for us, the apartment in Munich. I have nothing. Lars has nothing." She looked down at the boy, then back at me. "I know I have no right to ask. I know what I was to your husband. But Lars is innocent. He did not choose his father." I looked at the child, 8 years old, confused, clutching his mother's hand in a strange country where he didn't speak the language. A boy who had done nothing wrong except be born to the wrong man. Emma touched my arm. "Mom?" I thought about everything Richard had taken from me. My career, my confidence, my sister. 28 years of my life spent being someone I was never meant to be. And now, standing on my doorstep, was the final complication. The child he had made while lying to me. The woman he had loved while calling me decoration. I should have hated them. I should have turned them away, slammed the door, protected what was left of my wounded heart. But I was tired of being the woman Richard had created. The woman who smiled and nodded and never asked questions. The woman who let other people decide who she should be. I looked at Marlene. I looked at Lars. "Come inside," I said. "We'll figure something out." Emma stared at me. "Mom, are you sure?" I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Not who I was, not what came next, not whether I could forgive or forget or move forward. But I was done being certain. Certainty had been Richard's domain. Mine was something messier, something harder, something that looked a lot like hope. Marlene's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mrs. Hartman. Olivia, I said. My name is Olivia. I led them into the house that was finally mine, filled with my daughters and my rocking chair and the ghost of the woman I used to be. Lars looked around with wide eyes, still holding his mother's hand. Would you like some tea? I asked. Marlene nodded, unable to speak. I went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. Through the window I could see the garden, the lavender I had just planted, the empty space where the roses used to be, the oak tree where my children had played and grown and become the people they were. I didn't know what would happen next, with Marlene, with Lars, with the trial, with the rest of my life, but for the first time in 28 years, I wasn't afraid of not knowing. I was free. The kettle began to whistle. I poured the water, arranged the cups, and carried the tray into the living room where my daughters sat with my husband's mistress and my husband's son. It was, I thought, the strangest family gathering I had ever hosted. But maybe that was okay. Maybe family wasn't about blood or marriage or the lies people told to keep you small. Maybe family was about choosing every day, over and over, to show up for the people who needed you. I handed Marlene her tea. I smiled at Lars. I sat down in my rocking chair by the window and looked out at the garden I was finally learning to tend. The sun was setting over Alexandria, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in a jail cell, Richard was learning what it felt like to be invisible, and I was learning what it felt like to be seen. This story was sent by a listener who asked us to tell you, the ending is never really the ending. It's just a place where you decide to start again. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes of someone else's lies, share your story with our channel and tell us, could you open your door to the woman your husband loved and the child he made when everything inside you wanted to turn them away? Comment below what you would have done. And if you have your own story of betrayal and liberation, send it to us. We're listening.